It is time, dear listeners. Tonight we finish the bloody tale of the immortal plunderer, and in a way we aid Rolando Altamar in his crimson quest to carve his name into the flesh of history. But we do so not out of alignment with his intentions, but as a warning, a reminder that even the loudest forms of salvation can always hide golden daggers as promises of virtue. I will leave you to judge for yourselves. Are the apostles worth your loyalty? Will you truly follow a faith so carelessly? In this city, we will not tell you what to worship or who to believe. Instead, we implore you to find your own answers and come to your own conclusions. After all, a shepherd always leads their sheep, but the sheep will never know if they are being led to shelter or to slaughter. Now, let us end our story, and I warn you, listen with an open mind and pay attention to the marks that follow one who worshipped the wrong saints. The air around the chapel was quiet, eerily so for such a violent night. The occasional flash of unnatural light from within stood sharply against the light coming from the fires of the town. Its grounds were neatly kept, its aged stone walls polished and maintained to remarkable standards. It was a place meant to inspire peace and harmony. But tonight all it could resemble was dread and fear. Rolando passed through the iron gates of the chapel's yard. He was greeted by a sight that would have shaken the rest of the crew, but not him, not anymore. The silhouette of men who once were approached, their withered visage illuminated by their pale glow, as if stolen from the moons themselves. With each step, their unnatural forms rippled, bodies half forgotten by time. Chunks of flesh peeled away in silent wisps, curling into ash and vanishing into the wind. Their bones cracked like old wood, joints moving on memory more than muscle, and their eyes glowed not with hatred, but with obedience. Each soul summoned was a candle burning from both ends, their freedom promised only through their undoing. "Oh, the priest is desperate, I see." The souls wailed and charged towards him, rusted broken weapons drawn in withered hands carrying the chill of death with them. Rolando didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for his sword. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out the stolen crest of atonement. He held it towards the charging specters and whispered something old, something wrong, and with each word the air shifted, and the crest began glowing with a hunger all its own. The summoned spirits paused, heads twitching toward the relic like wolves catching scent of meat. Then, like smoke drawn into a dying hearth, they were pulled in. One by one, they vanished into the beads, and with every soul, the crest manifested a new bead. Now the crest carried 4 obsidian beads that glimmered with a faint purple glow. Rolando examined each one with interest. Humph. Poor fools, dancing to the hymns of another's prayers. Rolando's eyes were drawn again to yet another eerie glow from the chapel, but with this one, the rhythm stopped. There was no more glow, and the chapel felt silent, dead silent, truly desperate indeed. The doors of the chapel burst open, cracked wood splintering against stone. Rolando stepped into the holy hall with blood up to his elbows, fangs bared in a crimson grin. The flames outside cast long shadows through stained glass windows, painting saints in red. And yet, for all his macabre theatrics, they paled in comparison with the heretic sight that was the chapel's hall before him. Whatever people had fled the carnage in the town, they were all here, yet their fate were no better than those that had been fed on. The priest stood at the altar of his chapel, a spider nestled in his own web. He tossed a hollowed husk of a body, a young woman by the looks of it. At least she might have looked young once. Now she looked like a mummified corpse. The hall of the chapel was layered with bodies piled on one another in similar fashion, all drained of their very essence, their face struck with fear, grief, or horror. There were few words that could be used to paint such a ghastly sight: the dread, the hypocrisy. The priest focused his attention now to Rolando, his crest wrapped around his wrist, its link filled with dozens of beads, dozens of souls. Then, you demented scoundrel, godless heathen, you dare enter this place of worship? Rolando stepped forward, and as he did, he noticed something on the floor, a ring formed of dust and salt. No, not just dust, vampire ashes. Rolando couldn't help himself from laughing as he kicked the superstitious circle with his foot. Oh, this is too good. You do care. And here I thought my threats fell on the ears of a true vindicator of Valeros. His tone grew darker, and his expression of delight turned to one of apathy. But you're just another vulture, gorging yourself in the innocence of the ones you shepherd. The priest held up his crest in one hand and raised the other. These souls are under my care. They serve better as my wards than as your victims. The priest shouted a chant, a hymn of something that sounded wrong, dark, and eerie. From his gilded crest, 3 souls lashed out in a wailing storm of unnatural fog and ashes towards Rolando. He in turn raised his own stolen crest and chanted as he continued his slow steps forward. As easily as the souls burst from Soriano's crest, so too did they get sucked into Rolando's. 3 new beads manifested into the link of his crest. Soriano was taken aback, shocked to see that Rolando could wield such a power. But that's not possible. Surprised? He chuckled dryly. I don't blame you. I would be too if I were in your shoes. I remember what it was like to wear that mask, so crude, so uncomfortable and pointless. Pointless? This is the mask of Valeros, the keeper of... Not that worn-out piece of scrap on your face. I'm talking about the one you wear behind it. Soriano seemed confused. There was no other mask beneath the one he wore. But then it was all made clear as Rolando reached into his coat to pull out a worn-out, rusted scrap of iron and tossed it at the priest's feet. A mask. One as detailed and as ornate as the one Soriano wore. Only Rolando's was weathered, tattered from years of neglect, covered in scratches and mistreated. Rolando reached the priest's altar, sword drawn in one hand, and the stolen crest in the other. He pushed his sword against Soriano's chest and pushed him back until Soriano's back was against the wall behind his altar. I mean your real one, the one you wear to sleep, to eat, to look your flock in the eye while you drain them like cattle and call it salvation. You see, I too recited the oath of vindication once. I chanted the verses, bathed in your pools, walked through your gilded halls, thinking the toll was fair. That penance bought mercy. Rolando drove his sword into the priest's belly, striking him deep until he was pinned against the wall. The priest groaned and yelled in pain as blood pooled from his wound and mouth, cursing Rolando with every breath as he fell to the floor. Oh, I know what I am. A scoundrel, a pitiless pirate, a guiltless plunderer. I make no efforts in hiding it. I wear my twisted truth proudly. But what I can't stand more than anything is a gutless, fear-mongering, festering leech, and I've long since renounced the pathetic lies of your creed. The priest remained silent for only a second, until one of the beads in his crest cracked and crumbled to dust. A soul claimed in his place. Then the priest chuckled, low and heaving, until it began a cackle ending with a grin, just as gruesome and malevolent as the one Rolando had when he put the town to the torch. There it was, Soriano's true face, a scoundrel, a heathen prying on the innocent. You pathetic fool, "This is nothing," Soriano spat out blood. "I've been the shepherd of this town for decades. I've signed many souls into our faith and hold the unresolved penance of hundreds. You think this will be enough to kill me? You'd have to kill me 100 times over, condemn the souls of all who I have shepherded." Rolando knelt beside him, slow and deliberate, his tone almost gentle. "Oh no, mate. You don't seem to understand just how deep in the shit your robes are right now, but don't worry." With his sword still lodged in the priest's belly, he took his hand and grabbed Soriano's hand that was holding the crest. "Those weary souls will be put to good use." He raised the crest he'd stolen, its beads glinting dimly in the candlelight, and began to chant. Not a hymn, not a prayer, a rite, the rite all priests dread. Soriano's eyes widened, his voice caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. "No, no, you wouldn't." But it was already happening. One by one, the beads on Soriano's crest dimmed, cracked, and shattered. The souls they held burst free in wisps of spectral light, and before they could drift skyward, they twisted, spiraled, and were drawn to Rolando's crest. The rosary grew heavy with their weight. Soriano tried to struggle away from Rolando's grip. He pulled back his own arm with the other, tried to pull out the sword from his gut. Anything, just to get away from what Rolando was doing. His face twisted in fear as each soul that escaped his grasp pulled from his own as they were funneled into Rolando's crest. His body began to wither and rot, years of prolonged existence at the cost of others showing themselves. Soriano's struggles grew weaker and his screams quieter, until there he lay, a husk of himself more decrepit and decayed than those of his followers. Rolando dropped Soriano's body to the floor, dust and ashes kicking up when it hit the ground. He stared down the lifeless husk of that wretched holy man, while wrapping his crest around his arm, now decorated with a few dozen beads. Then he proceeded to quote a verse from the Book of Penance. "Let no man hide behind borrowed virtue, for the warden sees the stain beneath the robe. The soul that barters mercy for power shall find no sanctuary in death." Rolando then picked up his tattered mask and tucked it away into his coat. Once a symbol that he wore proudly and committed to, now was little more than a reminder of a life he no longer respected. "All these souls bound to you, and you still died a coward draped in stained robes." With one last look at the altar, he gathered himself and stepped away from this forsaken place. He looked at all the bodies laid at their pews, their bodies contoured in prayers, while their faces looked ghastly and shocked. Had this been a rarity, perhaps Rolando would have spared more sympathy for the souls bound to him now. But he knew the truth. He knew what these poor fools were being herded for. As the echoes of his boots filled the halls of the chapel with every step while he walked away, he contemplated their fates and whether or not he would truly carry this with him again. This reminder of who he served, who he believed in once. Then he clutched his crest in his hand and took one last look at the ruined halls and broken windows of this once holy place. "No, this won't be a penance. This will be my absolution." The night air welcomed him with the scent of salt and smoke. The town still burned. Screams had dwindled, replaced by the soft groans of dying fires and the cackling of his crew echoing in the distance. The harbor wasn't far now. The carnage seems to have lasted longer than the crew anticipated. Time really had a funny way of just vanishing when you were having fun after all. The sky began to crack open with the sun's first light. Sunrise was approaching. Rolando regrouped with the crew just in time, still roughly the same number of scoundrels as there were earlier tonight. Roughly. They all looked a mess of blood and ashes themselves, yet the looks on their faces couldn't be more satisfied. Jean couldn't help but to notice the new trinket wrapped around Rolando's wrist. "That's a lovely little charm you got there, choir boy. Reminds you of your holy days, does it?" Rolando simply rolled his eyes, but upon a second examination, he could see that Duval and the rest of the crew hadn't come down from the governor's villa empty-handed either. Each one had their pockets filled, and more than half of them wore trinkets of silver or gold on their person. They could barely take a step without their pockets clinking. "I take it you brought your concerns to the governor, then?" Jean grinned, smugly shaking his pockets. "Oh, I did, at length, and the governor seemed more than eager to compensate our crew for the trouble he caused us." They shared a laugh for a moment, taking in the ash-filled scent of their slaughter. People will be talking about this for decades. They could see their ship was still at the harbor. Most likely they were waiting for the next day to strip it apart, given that they didn't expect the crew to come back as they did. "How fortunate," Rolando muttered. "Come on, we need to reach the sea before dawn," or a cry for help. A weathered, hoarse voice called out to Jean and Rolando by name. They followed it to a gibbet just off the entrance to the town, where they found Captain Draven, captured and displayed over a sign that read, "Piracy will not be tolerated." How quaint the town sought to make a symbol of their captain. Rolando and the rest couldn't help but to laugh at the sight of their pitiful captain. His toll had not been paid yet. He still lived. "Ahoy, Captain! Fancy the view from upon your throne, I see." The captain spat back at the crew with dried lips. "Let me down." His voice certainly did not keep its boastful gravitas, as when he barked orders at them on the ship. He'd certainly seen better days. The townsfolk had not only hung him up like a caged bird, they threw things at him. Rocks, spoiled fruits. He was bruised, and his stench drowned out the scorched smell of the burning town. Jean stepped forward, drawing his sword. The captain's eyes widened in recognition of Jean's intent. But it was too late. Jean stabbed him through the cage. It wasn't enough to kill him outright, but it was only a matter of time from this point. He could have gone for the heart, the stomach, anywhere to kill him, but he went for a slow, deliberate kill. Why? He left the sword stabbed in the captain's gut and stepped back, spitting at the cage. "Your time is over, Captain. You led us to ruin. Now, you'll pay your toll like the rest of us. You spineless worm." The captain was too weak to retort. He couldn't plead or yell. He simply sank back against his cage. He would turn at the next midnight, and by the morning he would burn in his pyre, just like the others. All because of his incompetence. The crew walked away, not a single one showing an ounce of remorse for their captain. Even Rolando, who the captain looked to for one last spark of hope, walked away without a second glance. The mood certainly wasn't as festive as it had been a moment ago. They all knew what fate awaited the captain come morning. They didn't care, at least they told themselves they didn't, on their way back to the ship. The sun lit the sky now. The crew made it to the ship just in time. Had they stayed on shore a minute longer, they wouldn't be here to see their handiwork behind them like a painted canvas. The fires they raised had long since burned out. Only dark clouds of bellowing smoke decorated the town behind a pale shore lit by the morning light. The crew took to their roles as if driven by instinct. Anchor raised, sails set, and a course charted for open seas. Their work now the muscle memory of a crew, too familiar with living and dying at sea. No orders needed to be given to set sail after ending a raid. And yet, there was still a question demanding an answer. As they sailed further away, the rising smokes of the town, now more like the final signature of a devilish design. The crew started to feel it. The stillness, a silence akin to the quiet before a storm. Then they heard Rolando's call, turning their attention to the quarterdeck. There he stood, wind bellowing his blood-stained coat, the noose still loosely hanging from his neck like a medal as he addressed the crew. "Captain Draven is no more," his voice carried calm and clear. "His command burned along with the town we left behind, and now the Maiden of Lament needs a new captain worthy of her. What say you?" An open invitation without an address, one that no one seemed to even want to respond to, because they knew what he was doing and they knew what their responses would imply. Rolando was ready to take their silence on as the answer to the question once no one answered. None but one man. Jean stepped forward through the gathered crew, freshly bandaged and smiling with intent. "And you think it should be you then, choir boy?" Rolando cocked his head. "I do. Have someone else in mind then?" "I. Me." The crew shifted. The tension rose like the tide. Rolando stepped to Jean, who already had his hand at his sword's hilt. "You're a good man, Jean. Are you sure this is the right move for you, throwing your life away like this?" Duval grinned, drawing his sword with a flourish. "I'm afraid so. I'm done leaving my fate in the hands of lesser men." A beat passed. Rolando stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, his voice low with a grin behind it. "Lesser?" he chuckled. "Oh, now you've done it, lad. Those drinks will have to wait till the mire." Without a warning, Rolando drew his sword and struck in the same moment. Jean barely parried his blow in time. He should have seen that coming. Still, he grinned and answered in kind. Two blood-soaked men met blade against blade. Each strike met with a block, each slash parried and tossed aside. The crew surrounded them and cheered. For who they cheered wasn't clear. Most likely they cheered for the carnage. It was not an elegant duel of gentlemen either. Jean countered a strike with a kick to Rolando's chin. Rolando struck Jean across the face with his fist when an opportunity presented itself. Their sheer ferocity matched, pace by pace, blow for blow. Jean was pushed against the crowd. They pushed him back in. "Rip out his heart," came the cry of one corner. "Blind the bastard," came the other. A crew that had filled their bellies and fire with the blood of innocence still hungered for more. Jean and Rolando were more than eager to please. For all their backhanded methods and dirty tricks, the smiles never left either man's face, each more than satisfied with the response of the other. A worthy opponent, if there ever was one, each thought. Jean found the opening he was looking for. He pushed Rolando back a few steps, a relentless flurry of blows forcing him to take 2 steps back, enough for Rolando to lose his footing for only a moment that was met with a swift backhand, opening his guard and giving Jean the opportunity to strike Rolando where it mattered, piercing his heart in one swift strike. The crew fell silent. Shock and surprise struck even Jean, but he did not relent. Rolando fell to his knees, coughing blood, and Jean was swift to end the fight. He pulled back his sword and slashed down his neck, cleaving his head from his body. Rolando's body sunk, and he kicked it to the side. His head rolled to Jean's feet, and he picked it up, his smile turning to a soft chuckle before he laughed with his full chest, raising the head of Rolando as his price. The crew broke their silence, cheering and applauding their new captain on like the crowd of a coliseum. "It's over, lads," Jean roared, his bloodthirst quenched with satisfaction. "The Maiden of Lament has a new captain now. I, Captain Jean Duval, will lead you all under my flag. I will lead you to glory, plunder, and wealth beyond your wildest dreams. I will soak the deck of our ship with the blood of our enemies, and to anyone who dares question my claim, look upon the results of defiance in my hands and coward." As far as Jean could tell, Once he turned to address the crew, his speech landed harder than he'd expect. The crew had gone from a roaring band of beasts to a quiet crowd in shock. He knew the difference between his skills and Rolando was noticeable, but was it really that surprising? Another look at the silent crowd, and he realized something. Something that shivered up his spine as he heard the smallest sound of a cracking bead. A rousing speech, Captain. Jean froze. Rolando's voice paralyzed him with fear as he looked up and saw Rolando's blood-stained head looking down at him with a grin. But I believe I have a point to retort with. Jean didn't have time to respond, or even process what was happening, before he felt a chilling hand hold his shoulder. Then he felt the cold steel of Rolando's blade striking him from behind. Not in a swift motion, but a slow, deliberate strike. Jean gasped as the tip of the blade pierced through his chest. He couldn't tell what feeling cut more deeply, the blade pushing through his chest, or the sight over his shoulder of Rolando's headless body slowly skewering him from behind. There was no question he could ask. The blood filling his throat wouldn't allow him to. How about a sermon, then? I believe the Book of Penance has something to say about a head for a head. Again, Rolando's movements weren't of a swift predator. They were the motions of a calm spider whose next meal was already doomed. Gently, Rolando's body pushed him down to his knees. Jean, already struck, didn't resist. He dropped Rolando's head while he tried to stay alive, instincts taking over reason now. Then, with the swiftness of a final strike, Rolando's body delivered his final verdict. A head for a head. It pulled the sword from Jean's chest and struck his neck. Once, twice, 3 strikes it took to sever Jean's head from his body, leaving the body limp on the ground, his head rolling in the direction of Rolando's. You were always the better man, Jean. Rolando's voice hummed low and respectful, just not the most clever. The duel was now truly over. Duval's severed head raised no comments about Rolando's victory, and there was no heretical resurrection from his part, and the crew still remained silent, their mouths agape and their eyes widened. They couldn't believe the sight before them, and it was clear that they weren't sure whether to be impressed or horrified. Right then, let's get on with it. Rolando's body walked over to his head. Instead of placing it back on his neck, he raised it well over his shoulder for the crew to see, to ensure none would doubt the events that had just transpired. Will there be anyone else? Any more objections to my command? No? Rolando played into the theatrics of this gruesome display. He didn't raise Duval's head, nor did he desecrate his body further than this. No, the crew knew exactly what they saw before them. A horror, a monster, a legend. It cost him a soul to make this point, but there was no denying now who was in charge and who would be in command. The crew did not roar his victory. They did not cheer for him the way they cheered for Jean. No, their submission to his will was absolute, accepted with quiet shock. This same collection of scoundrels, rogues, and bandits, the very same collection that set a town to the torch without a second thought for their weak, elder, or children, now knew a fear deeper than any they struck to the town of Costa Bravia. As Rolando reveled in the fear of his crew of bloodthirsty monsters when he took the helm and shouted orders, he knew that this would be the blood that would write his legend. Thus concludes the tale of the immortal plunderer, enacted from the very records of the Maiden of Lament and the man who would not stay dead when death came to collect. Rolando Altamar, priest, pirate, revenant. His name now joins the list of the damned and the unforgettable. We've shelved this tale deep in the black shelf, among the records that breathe even when bound in ink. A caution, a legacy, a curse. If this account left its mark on you, if the blood on the deck and the silence of the crew still echo behind your eyes, then stay tuned to the signal. The archives are never truly closed. Another page always waits. Next, our quill turns to Nethermore, a city swallowed in fog and superstition. There we follow the tragic first of Halbrecht's syndrome, a young girl barely past innocence, who smiled as the sickness took root, and never once wept for what she became. They say she still walks the alleys. They say she never stopped smiling. This has been the Adevilios Archives, a record kept, a debt remembered, and a story you were never meant to hear.